When my daughter was getting married, she told me not to walk her down the aisle, said her fiancé's rich stepdad was a better look. I sat quietly in the last pew and watched. 2 years later, she needed me. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Sammy Shields from Chicago. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. They always say a daughter's first love is her father. I used to believe that. Used to wear it like armor on the worst days. After her mother died, it was just me and Ava. I was 35, freshly widowed, and standing in a hospital parking lot with a newborn in one hand and a diaper bag I barely knew how to use in the other. I made a quiet vow right then. You will never go without, not as long as I'm breathing. And for 26 years, I kept that promise. I didn't throw her in private schools or hand her things she hadn't earned. But I showed up, every school concert, every math tutor, every scraped knee and heartbreak. I packed lunches. I taught her how to drive. I built her first bookshelf with my own 2 hands. She called me Daddy until college, and even when she dropped it for Dad, I could still see the warmth behind her eyes. But over time, that warmth turned into calculation. She started measuring love in money, status, influence, things I didn't traffic in. I wasn't poor, not by a mile. I run a successful home renovation business. Built it from scratch. Paid off my house early, kept a healthy savings account, invested smart. But I wasn't flashy. No Gucci belts, no leased Benz, no networking galas. Just a man who worked, read quietly at night, and taught his daughter right from wrong. At least, I thought I had. The shift started around the time she got serious with Brandon, the fiancé. The first time I met him, he called me Mr. Unpolished as a joke. I didn't laugh. Neither did Ava, but she didn't defend me either. That was the first red flag I folded and put in my back pocket. The second came at a dinner party at Brandon's stepfather's estate. And estate, that's what they called it, like we were in the English countryside. Marble floors, champagne towers, and conversations that sounded like LinkedIn bios. That night, Ava barely spoke to me. She was too busy clinging to the arm of her future and performing for his circle of investors, friends, and family. She introduced me once. This is my dad, Jack. He owns a construction thing. Like I was an afterthought to her curated narrative. But nothing prepared me for what came next. We were sitting on my back porch one Sunday afternoon, her sipping iced coffee, me nursing a beer, when she said it. No preamble, no build-up. Dad, I wanted to talk to you about the wedding. All right, I said, sitting up straighter. She looked away, fiddling with her straw. We've been talking and, well, we think it would be a better look if Brandon's stepdad walked me down the aisle. I blinked. A better look? It's just optics, you know. He's very well connected. A lot of important people will be there. She didn't look at me when she said it. I don't know if that was out of guilt or arrogance. Probably both. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't curse. I just set my beer down and stared at her. So, after raising you by myself for 26 years, I'm not good enough to walk you down the aisle because I don't have stock options and a golf membership? It's not like that, she mumbled. No, I said, standing. It's exactly like that. You're selling me short because I don't fit the image you want to project. She finally looked at me then, defensive, almost teary. I'm not selling you short. It's just one part of one day. No, I said again. It's a choice. A public one. And every choice has a consequence. She crossed her arms. Why are you making this about you? I laughed, low and bitter. You just made your entire wedding about status, and you're asking me why I'm making it personal. She didn't respond. I could have begged. I could have reminded her who taught her to ride a bike, who stayed up late helping her build college applications, who pulled double shifts when she needed braces. But I didn't. I just walked back inside, took the envelope I'd labeled Ava's wedding fund from my filing cabinet, and wrote in thick black Sharpie over it. Cancelled. I'm not a man who believes in second-class treatment from people I raised. When the wedding day came, I didn't protest. I wore my best navy suit, polished my shoes, and sat quietly in the last pew. Alone, watching her be walked down the aisle by a man who once tried to sell me a legacy investment package after dinner. People whispered, glancing back at me like I was the strange uncle who hadn't gotten the memo. I didn't care. I watched, but I didn't smile. She didn't look at me once. Afterward, during the reception, she approached me for 30 seconds, long enough to give me a perfunctory hug and whisper, "Thanks for understanding." I didn't respond. I just looked at her and nodded, not out of agreement, but closure. She walked away before I could say it, but the words sat sharp on my tongue. You made your decision, and now I'm making mine. That night, back home, I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, clicked open my travel folder, and booked a 3-week trip through Italy, France, and Spain. The money I'd saved for her cake, her dress, her dream venue, mine now. She'd made it clear I wasn't part of the fairy tale, and I wasn't about to be a footnote in someone else's fantasy. They say weddings are for the bride, but let's not pretend that's the whole story. A wedding is a broadcast, a declaration of who matters, who doesn't, and who fits the image. Ava didn't just choose to walk down the aisle with someone else. She chose to reframe her origin story. She edited me out of the spotlight and made room for someone shinier, more photogenic, wealthier. It wasn't just a slight. It was a rewrite. And I sat there like a quiet footnote in the back row, watching my own daughter pretend I was never the headline. I arrived 15 minutes early. Always half. I parked in the gravel overflow lot because I wasn't given a reserved space. Walked past luxury SUVs and men in pastel suits, women with bare shoulders and perfectly placed sunglasses. Nobody greeted me. Not one familiar face. I didn't expect a red carpet, but I would have settled for basic human courtesy. The usher barely glanced at the card I handed him. Jack Morano, father of the bride, before showing me to the last pew on the bride's side. No front row seat. No acknowledgement. Just a nod and a gesture, like I was being seated at a restaurant I didn't belong in. I straightened my jacket, kept my face neutral, and sat. The ceremony started 10 minutes late. The music was classical, piped in through hidden speakers, probably curated by some wedding planner with a multi-thousand-dollar fee. I watched guests fawn over each other, adjusting ties, snapping discreet photos. And then the music swelled. She stepped out from the back of the church, arm in arm with the man she'd chosen, Brandon's stepfather, Warren. He was tall, silver-haired, draped in a custom-tailored tux. The kind of man who smells like legacy and portfolio diversification. The crowd murmured with admiration. I watched her smile. Not the warm, crinkled-nose smile she gave me when she was a kid, but a polished, practiced one, like she was already preparing for her photo in Modern Bride. She looked radiant, yes, but distant. Her arm didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't search the pews for me. I could have been a stranger on the street. Warren leaned in and whispered something before he handed her off. She laughed, too loud, a little performative. My hands tightened around the program. The vows were flowery, theatrical. Brandon promised her a life of abundance and elevation. She promised him devotion and elegance. There was nothing raw, nothing real, just a pair of resumes being read aloud. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," people applauded like it was a job well done. After the ceremony, I stood back. I wasn't invited into the family photos. Wasn't pulled into the receiving line. A few people smiled awkwardly at me, unsure whether to ask who I was or just keep moving. One woman leaned toward me and said, "You must be with catering." I didn't correct her. I just nodded and walked toward the parking lot. But Ava found me before I could leave. She moved quickly, dress hiked up slightly, so she wouldn't trip in her heels. Her expression was somewhere between guilt and dismissiveness. "Dad," she said, wrapping me in a half-hug that was more choreography than affection. "Thank you for coming." I looked at her. Of course. Wouldn't miss it. She hesitated, eyes darting. I know. It was kind of last minute with the change. We thought it made sense. "You made your choice," I said evenly. "I hope you understand." "It was never personal." "Oh, it was entirely personal," I corrected. "But I understand just fine." She stiffened. "It was one moment." "No," I said. "It was the moment. And you gave it away." She blinked like I'd slapped her. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I just turned toward my truck and left her standing there, wind tugging at her veil like even the weather wanted her to think twice. That night, at home, I sat down at the old oak dining table. Same one I'd sanded and refinished after her first big art project ruined it in middle school. I poured a glass of red wine, opened my laptop, and clicked over to my travel bookmarks. Italy first, then Spain, maybe Greece. I didn't know how long I'd be gone, but I knew exactly how much I had saved, $42,700. Every penny was originally meant for her dream wedding. Now it was mine. A week later, the wedding photos showed up online. Her social media was flooded with images. Her laughing with Warren, arms around Brandon, champagne in hand, golden sunlight catching the edge of her designer dress. No sign of me, not even in the background. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't a fluke or a misunderstanding. This was her reshaping the story of her life. She wasn't just excluding me from one day. She was erasing me from the narrative entirely. Because I didn't look the part. Because I didn't play the game. Because being raised by a blue-collar father who taught her loyalty and discipline wasn't as photogenic as being the new heiress of wealth and polished connections. I didn't call, didn't text. I didn't send a gift or ask how the honeymoon went. I had nothing more to say. Instead, I mailed myself a postcard from Rome 4 weeks later. On the back, I wrote, "Living the life your father gave you is one thing. Erasing him from it is another." I didn't send it to her. I pinned it to my fridge. It had been 23 months since the wedding. I remember because I marked the date by where I was, standing on a stone balcony in Cordoba, watching the rooftops blush gold under the late Spanish sun. I'd stopped keeping up with her life, her updates, her curated posts, her picture-perfect marriage. I figured if she wanted me gone, she could have it her way. I didn't dwell. I didn't brood. I simply removed myself from the narrative. My days became quieter, but not hollow. I spent mornings in the woodshop, refinishing antique chairs and experimenting with walnut joinery. I went on hikes with a buddy from my cycling group, played chess at the park, flirted with a widow named Jeanette at the local co-op. It wasn't the life I thought I'd have at 62, but it was mine, and I liked the quiet. Then the voicemail came. I was out on the back porch oiling my work boots when I heard the buzz from the phone on the windowsill. One missed call. No name, just a number I hadn't saved. A minute later, the voicemail alert dinged. I let it sit while I finished both boots, then wiped my hands, walked inside, and hit play. "Dad, it's me. It's Ava. Please, just pick up. I don't know what to do." Brandon left. He drained everything. I went to the bank, and there was nothing. The lawyer says the prenup was airtight, and I didn't even read it. I thought I could trust him. God, I was so stupid. Please call me back. I need you. I need my dad. I stared at the screen long after the message ended. Her voice echoed through the room like it had been waiting all this time to crawl back inside my chest and nest in old wounds. I replayed it once more, then again, and then I hit delete. But I didn't block the number. I wasn't cruel. Just finished. There's a difference. The next day, I told my friend Marcus about it. We were having coffee in his backyard, the smell of cut grass thick in the air. "She left you out of the most important moment of her life," he said, not looking up from his crossword. "And now she wants back in when her castle crumbles?" She sounded scared, I admitted. He snorted. "Yeah, well, choices make noise when they fall apart." I didn't argue. He wasn't wrong. 3 days later, she called again. I didn't answer. She texted after that. "Please, can we talk?" Then another. "I'm not asking for money. I just need a place to think." And finally, "You're still my dad." That has to mean something. I stared at that last one for a long time. It's funny how people think titles mean unconditional access. Like being a daughter grants permanent admission, regardless of behavior. I don't think she ever really believed I'd say no. Because for 26 years, I never had. That weekend, I took a drive out to a quiet lake I used to bring her to when she was small. We'd skip rocks, watch dragonflies land on lily pads, share peanut butter sandwiches with apple slices on the side. I sat on the same bench we used to claim every Sunday, now worn smooth and softened with time. I let myself remember, not the curated past she tried to erase, but the real one. The one where I was the only one holding the damn thing together. When I got home, I called her back. She answered on the first ring, voice tight and hopeful. "Dad, you can come by," I said. "Tomorrow." 1 hour. She didn't ask for more time. She knew better. When she showed up, she looked smaller. Not physically, though she'd lost weight, but in the way her presence used to fill a room. She wore dark sunglasses, and her hair was pulled back into a low bun. Designer coat, but old sneakers. She sat down at the kitchen table and looked around, like she half expected the house to have changed in her absence. It hadn't, just like I hadn't. "I'm sorry," she started, but I held up a hand. "I didn't bring you here for apologies," I said. "I brought you here for clarity." She blinked. "Okay. You left me out," I said calmly. "You edited me out. And now you're here because you're out of options. Don't confuse desperation for reconciliation." She flinched. I didn't know what else to do. I thought maybe you still had that fund." I nodded. "I did. 42 grand. It's gone." Her eyes widened. "Gone. Yep. Spent it on myself. Traveled. Invested in my shop. Had a damn good time doing it." She stared at the table, stunned. "I had that money because I believed in your future. But the day you handed another man my role, I stopped believing you saw me in yours." "I made a mistake," she whispered. "You made a choice," I corrected. "And now, so have I." She bit her lip, tears brimming. "I have nowhere to go. You have a name. And you married into money once. You'll figure something out. But I'm your daughter." I sighed, leaned back. "And I was your father. Until you made me a stranger in your story." She stood abruptly, blinking fast. "This is who you are now?" "Colt." "No," I said. "This is who I've always been. You just stopped seeing it when you started chasing reflections." She left without another word. No hug. No door slam. Just silence. And for the first time in 2 years, it felt like she was finally hearing me. A week passed. No calls. No texts. No midnight apologies or half-formed explanations typed and deleted in a swirl of guilt. Just silence. And for the first time since all this began, I wasn't waiting for the silence to break. I didn't check my phone compulsively. I didn't replay old voicemails or reread old messages. I let it stay quiet. Then on a Wednesday morning, gray skies, cold coffee, I heard a knock at the door. Not a frantic one. Not the kind you'd expect from someone desperate. No, this was slower. Calculated. She knew I'd be home. She knew I'd answer. I opened it to find her standing there in a blazer 2 sizes too big, makeup smudged under tired eyes, a worn leather bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't look like Ava, not the curated version she'd polished to perfection over the last few years. She looked like the girl who used to fall asleep on the living room rug watching Disney movies. Just older. More hollowed out. "I don't want to stay," she said right away. "I just wanted to talk. In person." I stepped aside and motioned her in. She walked in like a guest, not a daughter. Didn't ask to go to her old room. Didn't drift toward the fridge like she used to. She sat down at the kitchen table, folded her hands, and waited. I poured us both coffee. Black. No sugar. Just the way I'd taught her. She used to hate it. I slid the mug across the table without a word, then sat across from her. "Say what you came to say." She swallowed. "I'm not asking for money." "Good. I wanted to understand. I mean, I know you're mad. Stop." I cut in, firm. "Don't reduce this to anger. I'm not mad. I'm resolved." She blinked, caught off guard. "Resolved? I've accepted what you are, what you did, and what you valued." She looked down into her cup. "I was stupid." "No," I said. "You were strategic. Don't cheapen it with false humility." That one hit her. She sat back, staring at me. "So what now? We're just strangers?" "I wouldn't say strangers," I said. "Strangers are neutral. You made choices that removed me from your inner circle. That's not neutral. That's deliberate." She looked like she wanted to fight back, but there was no ground to stand on. "Not anymore. I saved for you," I said, my voice even. "For your life. For your future. I built a cushion so you'd never have to fall too hard. And when it mattered most, when you had the chance to honor that, you replaced me. Not privately. Not reluctantly. Publicly. Eagerly." Tears welled up. "I thought I was building a better life. You were building a stage. And you didn't think I belonged on it." She shook her head slowly. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, I said. But consequences? They're fair. She went quiet again. I could tell she wasn't used to conversations where she wasn't being soothed or rescued. That had always been my role. Steady hand. Soft landing. I realized in that moment, maybe for the first time, that I'd never taught her how to lose something without a net beneath her. That was on me. Do you love me at all? She asked, and for a moment, I saw the little girl again. Not the socialite. Not the wife. Just my daughter. Of course I love you, I said. But love doesn't mean indulgence. Love means boundaries. Love means truth. She nodded slowly. I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a thin envelope. I found this in one of Brandon's drawers before he left. I hesitated before taking it. Inside was a photo, me and her, when she was maybe 8, sitting in my truck, eating fast food after one of her swim meets. She had ketchup on her cheek and was holding up her medal. I looked exhausted but proud. He kept this? I asked. She shrugged. Maybe it reminded him what he was up against. I stared at it for a long time, not because I missed the moment, but because I realized it might have been the last time she truly looked at me with awe. She stood then, slowly. I should go. I walked her to the door. No embrace. No forgiveness. Just mutual recognition. Take care of yourself, I said. You too, she replied. And then she left. Again. But this time, I didn't feel gutted. I felt grounded. That night, I poured a glass of bourbon and opened my journal. Not the kind with tear-streaked entries or dramatic flair. Just a simple ledger of thoughts and truths. I wrote, today my daughter asked if I loved her. I do. But that's not the same as trusting her. And it's definitely not the same as forgetting. I can't rewrite her story, but I can write the rest of mine. I closed the journal, and I slept through the night. The fallout came slowly, like a leak beneath the surface that you don't notice until your foundation starts to shift. At first, it was a few side comments from extended family. My cousin Maria messaged me a vague, heard about Ava, hope everything's okay. Then my ex-sister-in-law, Denise, who hadn't said 2 words to me since Ava's graduation, called out of the blue. Jack, I just think maybe you're being a bit harsh. I was standing in the aisle of a hardware store, holding a set of replacement hinges for a pantry cabinet, when she said it. I stared at the phone in my hand like it had grown horns. She's your daughter, she continued. She's been through a lot. People make mistakes. I didn't realize publicly replacing your parent at your own wedding was a mistake. I cut in. There was silence on the other end. She was young, Jack, Denise said softly. Caught up. She was 26, I said flatly. Not 16. Old enough to make choices. Old enough to live with them. Fine, she snapped. But at some point, you're going to look around and realize you're alone. I smiled, small and bitter. I'm not alone. I just finally stopped surrounding myself with people who confuse unconditional love with unconditional access. She hung up after that, and I stood in the middle of the store, hands still clutching the hinges, feeling the familiar throb behind my right temple. It was always like this, people pushing you to forgive, not because they believed in healing, but because your boundaries made them uncomfortable. Over the next few weeks, the commentary came from all corners. My sister emailed me a long, emotional plea about the value of family and how holding on to resentment poisons the well. I didn't respond. A neighbor dropped by with extra tomatoes and casually mentioned Ava had reached out to her. Just to say hi. I nodded, thanked her for the produce, and closed the door before she could bring up anything else. But the one conversation that stuck wasn't from someone trying to pull me back in. It came from a young man named Ethan, a tenant who lived in the back unit of the duplex I owned. He was 27, drove for a courier service, and played guitar in a bar band on weekends. We weren't close, but he'd helped me shovel snow a few times, and once lent me a wrench when mine vanished mid-project. One evening, he saw me working in the garage and wandered over, hands in his hoodie pocket. Mind if I hang out a minute? He asked. I shrugged. Long day? He leaned against the workbench. My old man called today. First time in 6 years. I didn't say anything, just kept smoothing down a board with my orbital sander. He left when I was a kid, moved 3 states over, started a new family. No calls, no birthdays, nothing. Then today he sends this dumb text like, "Hey bud, thinking of you. Let's talk sometime." I turned the sander off, wiped the dust from the edge of the bench. "What did you do?" He looked down at the concrete floor. "I deleted it." "Good." He looked surprised. "You think so?" "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes distance is the healthiest boundary there is. Blood doesn't make someone family. Behavior does." He nodded slowly, chewing on that. "You get it." I looked at him for a long beat. "I get it more than I wish I did." And that was all we said. After he left, I stood in the garage a while longer, thinking about the irony of it all. I used to believe being a good father meant always being available. But maybe being a good man meant knowing when to close the damn door. That weekend, I sat at my desk and opened a folder labeled estate planning. It was overdue. Inside were papers I hadn't looked at in 2 years, beneficiaries, asset distributions, contingency clauses. I crossed Ava's name off as sole inheritor. Not out of revenge. Not even spite. Just realism. Instead, I reallocated 50% to a youth mentorship program I'd quietly donated to over the years. An organization that helped kids without fathers find structure, discipline, and someone who showed up. The other half I left open. Maybe I'd meet someone new. Maybe Ethan. Maybe someone I hadn't even crossed paths with yet. What mattered was that my legacy wouldn't be wasted on someone who saw me as an accessory to her curated life. That night, I got a text from Ava. Just one line. "You really cut me out of your will." I didn't respond. I sat on the porch with a cigar, watching the sky turn to velvet, the stars peeking out like little truths that couldn't be hidden. She was watching me. Through mutual contacts. Through whispers. Maybe even directly. But it didn't matter. She was learning what I'd already lived. When you gamble with people's loyalty, sometimes the house wins. And sometimes, the house remembers. There's a certain stillness that comes with finality. Not the volatile crash of an ending, but the quiet that settles after you stop expecting a knock at the door. That's where I was. Not bitter. Not brooding. Just still. I had built a life again, brick by deliberate brick. And this time, I made sure the foundation wasn't held up by anyone's approval but my own. Summer had rolled in heavy and slow. I spent most mornings on the porch with coffee, my boots kicked up on the railing, watching the street breathe to life. Kids biked past. The mail truck wheezed down the block, and my tenant Ethan strummed his guitar in the backyard whenever he had a day off. Peace had become routine, not something I chased, just something I lived. I hadn't heard from Ava in almost a month. No texts. No calls. The silence wasn't loud anymore. It just was. I imagined she was rebuilding. Maybe renting a modest place. Maybe dipping her toes into the job market for the first time in years. The thing about losing everything is that it either guts you or grits you. I hoped she'd find some grit. But that wasn't my business anymore. One Saturday morning, I drove out to the coast. Not for any big symbolic reason. Just because the forecast said 78 and clear, and I'd realized I hadn't stood by the ocean in over a year. I took the scenic route, 2-lane roads, pine trees like sentinels on both sides, winding curves that forced you to slow down and pay attention. I parked at a trailhead I hadn't visited since Ava was 12. Back then, she'd whined about the bugs, demanded piggyback rides halfway up the bluff. But when we reached the overlook, she'd gasped and said, "It looks like the whole world ends here." She wasn't wrong. I climbed the trail alone this time, my knees reminding me I wasn't 30 anymore, but still strong enough to keep going. At the top, I stood at the edge of the cliff, watching the Pacific crash into the rocks with rhythm and fury. I breathed in deep, salt air and eucalyptus, wind threading through my jacket, and I let myself remember. Not the betrayals, not the fallout, just her laugh. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine. The way she'd fall asleep in the truck after long drives, head resting against the window, trust etched across her face like it was carved in stone. "I did love you right," I whispered. "Even if you stopped loving me well." It wasn't forgiveness. Not exactly. Just recognition of what was and what wouldn't be again. A woman nearby, mid-50s maybe, gray braid down her back, stood beside me for a while without speaking. She looked over and said, "First time here?" I shook my head. "Used to come a long time ago." She nodded slowly. "It's good to return to places. See what's changed, And what hasn't? We didn't exchange names. We didn't have to. That night, I returned home and found a letter in my mailbox. Not a text, not a call. A real letter, stamped and sealed and addressed in Ava's handwriting. I took it inside, poured a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table before opening it. It was short. Dad, I've been angry. Not at you, at myself. For trading something solid for something shiny. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't either. I just want you to know. I see it now. All of it. What you gave. What I gave up. I'm not asking to come back. I just hope that, someday, you'll think of me and feel proud again. Ava. I stared at that last line for a long time. Proud. The thing is, I had been. Once. Not because of her achievements or her image, but because she had been mine. My girl. And even when she stopped being someone I recognized, I never stopped hoping she'd find her way again. I didn't write back. Not because I didn't care, but because I'd said everything I needed to say. I'd lived the truth loud enough that she heard it, even in the quiet. A few weeks later, I updated the estate plan again. I didn't put her back in entirely, but I gave her a portion, a modest trust, one that would mature in 10 years if certain benchmarks were met. It wasn't a reward. It was a reminder. People can change, but they have to do it on their own dime. One Sunday, Ethan helped me replace the front gate, and when we finished, we sat on the porch with beers and sandwiches. You ever think she'll come back? He asked. Maybe, I said. But if she does, it won't be through the front door until she's someone who knocks, not just assumes. He nodded. That's fair. And it was. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard. Somewhere down the street, wind chimes sang low and steady. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of everything and the surprising lightness of letting it go. She didn't just walk away from me that day at the altar. She walked toward a version of life where love was conditional on optics. And I let her. I didn't chase. I didn't plead. I let her live out the version of herself she thought would matter more. And when it crumbled, I didn't gloat. I just stood still. Because sometimes, being the man who stays standing when others fall, that's the quiet revenge. Have you ever had to draw a hard boundary with someone you love, even your own child? This story isn't just about walking away. It's about choosing your peace over performance. If this hit home for you, drop a comment and tell me. Would you have stood your ground or opened the door again? And if you want more stories that dig into the mess and the meaning behind family choices, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Your support helps bring these stories to life. See you soon in the next one.